having conflict is a good thing because everyone has an idea that they bring to the table. As a collective team with multiple diverse opinions on that team, you have to figure out a way that we're going to provide our target audience or our target customer whatever is going to be best for them.
I think it's important to remember that conflict can also be really dangerous, especially depending on the identities you hold and the context that you're in. For example, I remember as a freshman in my speech class, I was the only non-white person in the class, and I was one of, I think, 3 women in the class. It wasn't a very nice environment for me because I was perceived as being the only one with my views. So I think that's why diversity is so important.
One student had very strong attachment to his view of things as being the natural, most important view, and really put pressure on other students who were coming from a different perspective, a different background, maybe different gender or race, had different lived experiences. And he said, well, it's, you have to tell me, it's your problem to educate me. And I thought that really captured a lot of what can be problematic about some conflicts in class.
Conflict, it doesn't exist in a microcosm. The conflict that happens in the classroom or in within the job setting, it exists in the context of the rest of the world.
We need a culture that's in place where everyone, is encouraged to say something and to, express their opinion, even if it's not a popular one.
I didn't have to disclose my bias. And when I'm in private class, you can see that a lot. So it's harder for me, say, to make a statement that would be feminist or something, because then it would be like, oh, that's because you're a woman.
You first need to know that there's a bias in place before you can even think about addressing it. Because for a lot of people, they don't know they have a bias until they're either told or they discover it on their own. And I think college is a place where you do learn a lot of that. Having the comfortability to actually come out and say, well, I do have a bias with this. This is my perspective coming in. And this is where, I might be looked at a little differently when compared to the rest of the room. That's a whole nother level of, I'd say, guts.
When you are a person of color, you start out in America trying to become like a white person, and then eventually you kind of come into your own and you try to be an Asian person, a Black person, whatever you are. And then when you're a young adult, usually about college age, you start kind of fighting any part of you that seems white. And that you start kind of becoming biased towards white people. And it's this phase that a lot of 20, 21, whatever year olds goes through where they don't like white people, they don't like men, they don't like straight people, whatever it is. And then eventually you grow out of that and you start to realize that everybody's equal and that you shouldn't hate anybody and no individual is responsible for those kind of things.
But the fact of being sort of biased in some ways is, for me, a result of these structures that can be changed, but it also gives us a little bit of grace in terms of changing and evolving.
In public school, when I was in 6th grade, we had to do our first ever argumentative presentation. I did mine on abortion, and I didn't really think anything of it. That was just kind of something that we were allowed to talk about in middle school. And I would never do that here at John Carroll, even though I consider myself to be a super feminist, outspoken person.
But when I was first here, the protections for faculty and staff as employees did not include sexual orientation because they don't have to. My argument on many other faculty members was, yes, you can choose to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, but how cool would it be if you chose not to? And you were the first Jesuit school to do that. The administration at that time politely said, no, thank you, we would not like to do that. And the students reacted immediately.
Sound Advertising presents John Carroll as a place where if you are not engaged in ministry, you are not really affected by the Catholic aspects of the school. I don't think that that's really true at all, and on places where I work on campus, we have to do some very obviously Catholic ceremonies in order to get inducted into the job.
And even some of the imagery on all of our sports teams, on our uniforms, we all have a cross. Our football team has a little cross on their shoulder. Our basketball team has a cross on their pants. There are Muslim students on those teams. There are Jewish students on those teams. And they're still a part of the John Carroll community, but they wear that. And, that's kind of the gray area of discussion where do you keep that on the uniforms and stick to your Jesuit tradition? And at the same time, does that discourage students from coming to this institution because they think, well, that's not a place for me?
I actually think JCU is trying to increase its diversity, including religious diversity. How can you do that and create an environment that doesn't feel welcoming? I think it's fairly obvious that I don't think higher education has become too liberal. I think it's too conservative.
Politically, the way that people are painting up institutions now is that, everyone who's a college professor is a liberal who hates conservative students, and, they're out to get them, and, you don't need college if you don't want it, regardless of what you want to do with your life. But I think a lot of people who actually believe that sentiment haven't actually spoken to somebody who's in higher ed recently, and have misconceptions and listen to the talking heads that are feeding them that rhetoric. And the rolling, which is an issue that we have, I think, as a country as a whole.
The reason why a lot of times journalists and professors and teachers, but especially professors, are seen as liberal is in part because of the nature of what we do. If you get a PhD at almost any school, you're supposed to be doing original research. And the process of doing original research means you have to look at a problem from a lot of different perspectives, right? So in that sense, it's anti-dogmatic. Part of the core curriculum is speech, critical thinking, learning about other cultures, learning about natural sciences, all of that. Nothing about listening, nothing about reading. And that's what I see, is people coming at knowledge not from a place of, I have a right to say whatever I want, which is arguably true, but more, I have an obligation to listen to people around me, to really hear them, and to read up on stuff that I don't understand instead of asserting something.
People with minoritized views, I think they need to be empowered the most. Like I said, in the second step of the college racial awareness journey, you try to be a minority, you try to be Asian, you try to be Black, you try to be whatever. And in that process, you read, you watch movies, you consume media, and you learn how to be that person. And I think that is something is needed in order to be who you are confidently. And so I think universities should encourage that journey.
Specifically with regards to classroom environments, there are professors that are very good that do this all the time here at Carroll. I think it needs to be done more across the board in higher ed. Encourage students to disagree with them. And that's where some of the best college courses for a lot of students happen, is where, there was a disagreement between a student and a professor, and they actually had a really good conversation about it. But I personally know a bunch of students who, when they have a big paper that's coming up, will write whatever the professor's opinion is and hope that they're going to get a good grade with it because, this is what the professor thinks, and this is, pretty much what they laid out to me.
at the end of the day, you want to be a real person who believes something, right? And so to me, I want students to form their own arguments, but it's also beyond what happens in any given class. It's a lifetime formation.
Like something like that. That's what I want.
It creates a mentality with a subset of students that, well, I'm not going to be a learner and a free thinker and somebody who, is a problem solver for when I'm out in the real world. Instead, I'm somebody who just regurgitates and,
Right.
just does whatever I have to do to get by. And that's not the way anyone as an individual grows. That's not, if you have a collective of people that think like that, that's not how society grows. That's actually how we move backwards.